Uncle Ron stuff. Today's topic is the tree of knowledge. I One of my short stories in a book that I just published, Trifocals, One Man's View, is a story where an engineer gets charged, criminally charged, for one of his designs, and underneath of all of that, it's the idea that weapons of mass destruction are designed by human minds, and which made me think about. I think in the story of Adam and Eve, as I recollect, uh, God said, "Okay, but don't mess with that tree over there." And maybe that's just a mythology I have, but don't mess with that tree. But the serpent, the evil, talked to Eve and said, "Hey, and it was symbolized as an apple. I think that's what it was. And they took a bite out of the apple that hung from the tree of knowledge. And as the story goes, or I've remembered or heard, they were Adam and Eve were thrown out of the garden and immediately aware of their nakedness and had to clothe themselves, and often interpreted as meant that they would die. Death was the sentence for disobeying God and eating from the tree of knowledge. Okay, that's now I jump forward, and my story about a mechanical designer who was given a task to do, and was potentially would result in human death. And it was decided that because he had done the design, he would be criminally charged. He didn't operate the design, he didn't build the design, he never used his design device, but because he had applied his mind to it, he was criminally culpable for the deaths that his design may have happened. So part of the issue that I got into there was that perhaps the thrown out of the Garden of Eden, or eating, partaking of the tree of knowledge, it it will result in the whole human species being thrown out of the garden. And that's what had occurred to me recently. I hadn't thought about it, but mankind, there is some theory like how come, I think it, forgot his name immediately, um, who basically said, how come the universe isn't populated with civilizations? How come we don't see anything? How come we don't hear anything? Are we alone? That doesn't make sense that we're alone. And somebody else proselytized, made a hypothesis, a theory, an idea that civilizations go through stages, and to get to the stage where you would either be able to communicate or travel through the galaxy, and we're just limited to galaxies at this point, things are spread really out. You talk light years, and really hard technological advances from where we are now to that point is a long way off. But we move farther and further up our technological civilization ladder. And anyway, the theory was, how come we don't see them as well? Perhaps they're not born yet. Perhaps we're one of the more advanced species, and those in other places, they don't have radio yet, or they haven't invented any way to look for anybody else, or to send any kind of message, or to travel. We haven't invented a way to travel in the galaxy, and maybe a lot of others haven't either. They're not at that stage. The other thought is that they there are civilizations that get farther along in their technological awareness, using their mind, their consciousness, and whatever. They get farther along, but then they hit a barrier. And what is a barrier? A barrier could be, for example, a pandemic, where the human species is really wiped out, okay, from some sort of health crisis or pandemic. The other one, or more likely, of course, was with the invention of nuclear weapons and the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We have the threat that a nuclear war could occur, or enough nuclear weapons could be set off above ground that it would impact the environment such that it might take a while, but it would decimate a lot of life here on Earth. And that is very real. That is a border, that's a boundary. Perhaps other civilizations got to this point and they couldn't get past that. They self-destructed. Either a pandemic, a meteorite strike that took out the dinosaurs, whatever, 170 million years ago, whatever it was. Some sort of catastrophic event. Ones that you can't control, like meteorites. We don't have any way to stop meteorites at this point. Pandemics, we managed to stop COVID. It did take its toll, but we managed to stop that. But the big barrier is perhaps a war, a nuclear war, or some other, a biological war that wipes out a significant portion of the population. Even wiping out a significant portion would set us back, way back. You'd have to rebuild literally everything, or most of it, and it would take years and years, and you come right back full circle again to where you people invent things, make discoveries that can result in mass death. Nuclear weapons is one of them. There was the Oppenheimer movie recently, and I think after the fact there was some awareness of Oppenheimer and what he had worked on and been involved with. And had not those scientists used their minds, their talents, their intellect, they would not have come up with, what if it didn't work? What if it hadn't worked? Maybe that would have been the best scenario. But unfortunately, the knowledge was there, and they did succeed. Oppenheimer never dropped a bomb. He never pushed the trigger button. He didn't. He was just a designer. Actually, he was just a manager. But had there been an awareness, an ethics, if you will, by engineers and scientists, that they ought to think long and hard about working on any sort of project whose sole intent is death. And that's what I'm saying. The Garden of Eden and the knowledge. I think my understanding of human nature is that there are minds out there that will always be tempted by the challenge of something or other. The fact that it may be used to kill people is not a consequence to them. It's too much of a challenge. It is a temptation, a big temptation. And we may wipe ourselves off and out of the galaxy before we can ever get to the point that we can communicate or travel within the galaxy. I.e., that's why we're not seeing anybody else. Either they're younger than us technologically, maybe they're still at the dinosaur sort of age, or they got to where we are and couldn't make it through barriers from this point on, such as self-destruction via nuclear weapons or biological warfare, things I can't think of, or the next steps or next barriers, which I can't even imagine, having enough energy to accomplish, to keep the technological advancement going, the creation of enough energy to do that. Okay, I'm full circle back down around again. Hopefully you see what I'm talking about, and that the Garden of Eden story, being thrown out of the Garden of Eden, can be interpreted as that resulted in humans suffer death because they disobeyed God. That is affects every individual, and yeah, human death is very personal. The elimination of an entire species is something else, and that involves humans and applying their mind to a particular problem and the consequences. And I would like to make a campaign or challenge that we do introduce some sort of ethics into all of our engineering and scientific disciplines to say that one parameter of your exploration, your discovery, your designs, the application of your intellect should include an ethics parameter. What are the consequences going to be of this project you're working on? I think that is a valid thing to contemplate. Yeah, if nothing else, like Oppenheimer, what is his legacy? He's now gone. His legacy, he was the manager of the creation of the first atomic bomb. He managed it. He didn't design it, but he managed it. And probably without his management style and the people he gathered around him, they would not have been able to do it. Or you say, well, the Russians would have done it, or somebody else would have done it. And that's back on the hammering and hitting that nail on the head again. There will always be, unfortunately, I think, minds who the challenge is too big for them. They won't be able to resist the temptation. The discovery that's required to do something or other is just too much of a temptation. To hell with the consequences. This is Uncle Ron stuff. Today I was just talking about, I don't know what I had the original title, but it had to do going back to Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge and disobeying God, and perhaps the consequences of that are a much larger magnitude than simply the individual death. Perhaps it foretells the tale of the death of the whole human species. Today is the 21st of August, 2024.